Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Folks, even as the pandemic seems to wane, the police-demic rages on. One organization, one movement that is doing a great amount of work to help us, to save us, to make sure our lives matter, of course, is M4BL, the Movement for Black Lives. Our brother, who's the National Director for Organizing, he's also the National Director of the Working Families Party as well. We're happy to have him here. Brother Maurice Mitchell. My brother, how are you?
I'm doing well, brother. It's good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So let's start this way. A lot of discussion on George Floyd, justice and policing. And there's some who even want to water that down. But if we had our preference, which is also M4BL's preference, we'd really be talking about the Breathe Act, wouldn't we?
That's right. Yeah. The reality is that in the Justice and Policing Act, I believe that there were people of good faith engaged in negotiating that. If it was law a year ago, George Floyd would still not be with us. A lot of what it deals with is after the fact accountability, after police have killed or harmed one of us, either through registries for police or through creating the legal conditions where qualified immunity would no longer be a thing. What the Breathe Act focuses on is creating the conditions where police wouldn't harm us to begin with, right? What the Movement for Black Lives has said, what our movement has said, is that the fundamental reason, the fundamental driver of these incidences that are leading to the deaths of Black people is the interactions that we're having with the police. So if you're a white person in a middle class or upper middle class community, you largely don't interact with the police at all. Your children don't interact with the police. We know that their children commit crimes, sell drugs, use drugs, make mistakes, all outside of the surveillance of the police and the criminal legal system, right? They deal with it in their community, however they deal with it. And they understand that young people will be young people. Our children are surveilled by the police every single second. And often because they might have a small amount of marijuana in their pocket, that might be their first entry into the criminal legal system. As you know, once you're marked by the criminal legal system, it's hard to come out of that cycle. And oftentimes our children and our people are surveilled and harassed by police officers day in and day out. Those interactions and the density of those interactions lead to police misconduct and the murder of our people. So what we're saying is that we need to get at the root, which is why we called for defunding the police, why we called for shifting resources, the scale, scope, and size of the police and their budget, and shifting that and dramatically moving that towards the people. Because we know that community-based, and brother, you know that there's community-based violence interrupters who are on the ground, on the street level, who are doing this because they love their community. That's when you see a lot of the instances of intercommunity violence go down, is because the community is putting it in our own hands. And we need those folks to have more resources. We need to make sure that people who have mental illness get support. We need to make sure that people who are chemically dependent get some support. It's not a mystery that a significant percentage of the people who end up at the other end of a police gun are people who have mental illness, people who have chemical dependency. So we're saying, let's go to the root. And that's what the Breathe Act does. And the fact that in this political climate, we may not even get a Justice and Policing Act. That tells you where we're at in this country and how much more we need to continue to fight.
Right. And even if we get it, you already have people compromising on ending qualified immunity.
That's right.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any teeth in there, that's the only teeth there is.
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the few things in the bill that most people recognize would be helpful, right? But only for accountability, right? And I want to be clear about where the emphasis lies. But that is the one piece that they might actually negotiate out of it if they do pass it, right? So again, this is why it's so important that we continue to fight, right? It's not just about electing people, right? And then passing the baton on to them. We need to keep the pressure up, which is why we always believe in the power of social movements. Our social movements brought us to this point where we're having these conversations, right, where they feel a need in Congress to have to pass something. But we don't simply want to pass something, right? Right. That's not what people were marching for, to pass anything or to pass something based on an arbitrary deadline. We actually want to change the conditions for Black folks so that we could thrive. And that is the standard that we have.
And so what happens next in terms of the Breathe Act or any of the arguments for the provisions of the Breathe Act? Where do we go from here as, the George Floyd piece, which, probably is not going to pass anyway?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So this is a protracted struggle, right? We're not letting out at all. And, the good news is, the reality is policing happens on the very, very local level. There's tens of thousands of police departments. And so every single day things are happening. In Kansas City, the mayor just signed a provision that would lead to $47 million going from policing into a number of programs. Tashara Jones, not too long ago, became the mayor of St. Louis, and she's already moving to dramatically shrink the size of the police, and the resources are going into the community. Again and again on the local level, you're seeing people pick up the baton, move things forward. You're seeing folks in social movements push politicians in order to take action. So what's going to happen is that on the local, state, and federal level, there's a Breathe Act moving that's moved through the Illinois legislature. There's activity taking place all over the country. And so we're not going to let up. We know that it's likely that there'll be obstacles in front of us, but we as Black folks, we've been in this struggle for hundreds of years, right? And so these arbitrary deadlines are not going to slow us down, whether or not we meet them or not. We have to keep our eye on justice and the structural changes. And the standard for us has always been a standard where Black people could thrive in our communities, not just that our government is not killing us, which is one of the most basic standards that any citizen should have, right? And so we want to create the conditions, which is why we focus on investing in the things that make us whole and safe and divesting in the things that harm us. We want to create the conditions where we're moving away from police, jails, and prisons that everybody understands at this point, including independents and Republicans. Folks understand that police, jails, and prisons, the current criminal legal system is not working. We spent 40 years in this era of mass incarceration, just investing in those things. And so we want to shift the emphasis into people, investing in people and communities. And so that's the future of this movement, right? Not just the defunding and divestment, but also the investment in our people. And we're going to keep on pushing folks in Congress. It's great that folks like Ayanna Pressley is joining us and introduce the Breathe Act along with Rashida Tlaib. And we're going to need other folks to join us and continue on until we see changes on the federal, state, and local level.
So for those listening, because there is some confusion, when we say defund, and you've articulated it very well today, but some have even imparted to older African Americans, and some older African Americans have inferred that defund is synonymous with abolish, and the feeling that defund literally means there will no longer be crime fighting or protection from criminals, so to speak, in the African American community in particular. What is your response to those who say that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. There are, I want to be really clear about this. There are people who are police abolitionists, right? Who believe not today, but in some future to create a community that is safe and so connected that we don't need a institution like the police as we understand the police, right? the defund movement includes a lot of folks, including people who understand that things are not working and that we've experienced more than 40 years of disinvestment from our communities, from Black folks, from the commons, from our parks, from our healthcare, from education, from things that keep our kids safe, from youth programs, from summer jobs. We've seen 40 years of disinvestment from that, while we've seen 40 plus years of investment in jails, police, and prisons that have caused devastation in our communities, broken family ties. It's been a human rights and a civil rights violation on our people. Any Black person who has lived in a Black community and has Black family has been touched by the war on drugs, by mass incarceration. So what we're saying is that those things are harmful. Black folks, older Black folks, young Black folks know that. And we also know that making sure that there's more money for youth programs, making sure that there's money for organizers who are doing the interruption of the cycle of violence on the ground, we know that that works too. And so that's really what we're talking about. I think we need to, as a community, absolutely engage in the visionary conversation that folks like Marian Kaba and other folks have really led around what would it look like if we had a future community where we were able to deal with harm and we were able to create safety so we wouldn't need people with guns patrolling us. But today, we need to start with shifting the paradigm and focusing on the root causes of what is harming us. That's what this conversation is about. And, you know, if it wasn't for the defund movement and the campaign, we wouldn't be engaging in these critical conversations and these debates.
More MIP after this message. Do you agree with those who say the defund rhetoric was costly in the past election? I don't agree with that, but I'm wondering how you feel about that.
Oh, I vehemently disagree with that for multiple reasons, right? So I'm the national director of the Working Families Party. I spend most of my time focusing on electoral issues. I've been an organizer within the Movement for Black Lives since 2014. So both of these issues, both the defund movement and policing and elections and winning elections, something that is very, very close to me. There's been no data to show that the defund movement did anything to harm the electoral pursuits of anybody, right? The reality is the movement, the largest social movement in our country's history. Social movements are not designed in order to ensure that one political party or another is able to get over the top, right? Social movements are designed to change our culture in order to shift paradigms, in order to surface problems in our society. And as a social movement, the Black movement has been successful. Good job. Now, political parties and politicians, their job, on the other hand, is to figure out for their district, right? What are the messages? What are the appeals in order to make sure that they get through? That's the job of every single leader, every single member of Congress. And look, we already know that Republicans and the far right, they are going to reliably use dog whistles and sometimes racist megaphones. Law and order, that's nothing new. Okay, calling people socialists, that's nothing new. Using Black people as scapegoats, that's nothing new. You know, like Willie Horton and those ads that they used before, and using the fear of law and order in order to move white people based on their anxieties to vote for Republicans. Look, that is as old as this country. White grievance and fear and the far right using those tactics. So Democrats have to figure out every cycle how to challenge those tactics. And they can't scapegoat Black folks or our movements when they don't succeed. It's up to them to be introspective and to learn lessons about their wins and losses. And, you know, one of the things I always say about electoral wins and losses, victories, there's 1,000 parents. Losses are they're often orphaned, but they're often orphaned on the doorstep of Black folks. So when we lose, they always say, well, Black turnout. right? There always is an angle where Black people have to account for the losses of Democrats, right? When they win, it's everybody's win. And so I take great I take a great umbrage to that characterization. And there's been no data. It's just how people have been feeling. And I think it would make more sense for them to deal with how they're going to win in 2022. And we know that that's going to be a critical election where there's going to be a lot of efforts to take the party from in power out of power. And they're going to need to figure out what their appeal is. And they can't scapegoat our movement when they need to actually focus on winning.
Well, if anything, defund helped to not only mobilize the Black electorate to get out to vote as much as ever, if not more.
Oh, and that's right.
And not just the Black electorate, but the millennial and Gen Z electorate. I mean, that was energetic, and I think that's what people need to understand. And that's really what's going to make the difference. If you come to, and then, but see, here's the irony.
Yeah.
The Republicans in the Capitol Police budget bill voted to defund the Capitol Police.
That's right. That's right. I mean, there's irony on top of irony, right? So, Brother Mark, so yes, that's one thing I didn't say. So thank you for reminding me. 26 million people hit the streets, and all over the country, in every single state, including places like Wyoming, places where there weren't a lot of Black folks. Those people, and this is not conjecture, a significant component of those people moved into action, moved into political action, voted, organized, ensured that people could vote in communities like Atlanta and Philly and Milwaukee and Detroit, places that really mattered in the election. So it's actually, again, that's one thing that I'm glad you brought up. It's actually the opposite. When you look at the electoral impact, there's been studies that shown that places that had large mobilizations, there was an uptick in both Black turnout and voter registration of young people. So again, social movements, bringing people into the fold, that's a good thing for our democracy. And anybody who cast any aspersions to that happening, I think, it's unfortunate. Now, yes, there's so much irony around the law and order far right. I mean, come on. You can't script this. Look what's happening right now, the debate that they're having in Congress, right? The far right and the Republicans often like to say back the blue. They have an opportunity to do that on so many levels, simply to investigate the murder of police officers. We've all witnessed the January 6th attack of the Capitol, simply to investigate it. That would seem like the most bipartisan effort ever. When the United States was attacked on 9/11, there was a bipartisan effort to figure out what happened. This was another terrorist attack, this time a domestic terrorist attack. And it's being politicized, right? You had officers recently write a letter, dozens of officers, Capitol Police officers, write a letter to Congress calling for the investigation. Republicans are silent, right? And so they're very convenient with their back the blue rhetoric. There's no consistency there, right? Them and their folks are perfectly comfortable attacking police officers when it gets in the way of the one thing that they're concerned with. The only thing that the far right is concerned with is keeping power, consolidating power, and making sure others can't have any of their power. That's it. And so, yeah, they'll twist themselves into all types of pretzels in order to maintain power. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. And it's interesting. They want to make a false equivalency to the BLM movement and what was going on in the streets last summer. But BLM and those didn't kill any police. Everything was nonviolent.
In fact, and they don't report about this, there were white supremacists like on the West Coast that had killed police during those mobilizations.
Right. And so for them now to be in denial about that, it shows the hypocrisy. And you have a police force now, see, that's the situation is different from ours.
Mm-hmm.
Capitol Police have a very specific job. they're supposed to make sure, technically, that folks just don't roll up in the Capitol and kill members of Congress. I mean, that's pretty that's pretty straightforward. It's not,
Right.
you know, they don't get called in like the police do against us for any and everything. They're supposed to specifically protect you. So I don't even know the wisdom of letting people know that it's supposed to physically protect you. We don't give a damn and not gonna give you your money. I wouldn't do that. More MIP after this message. The other thing that's very, very interesting about defund, Brother Maurice, and something I say, and feel free to critique me on this, but this is an argument I often make to some of our own people, including some in the older generation. Oh, we need the police. We don't need to defund or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real about it. Black tax dollars fund these police departments. They not only kill us, Maurice, but don't provide really any real service.
Yeah.
And every time I ask this question, the crowd will say, "This last time you called the police for service, somebody broke in your house, stole your car, whatever, and you actually got service delivered. When was that? When does that happen? What are police doing to find missing and murdered Black people, particularly Black women? So you're paying for a service that's not even. Remember the song? People have to forget the song. 911 is a joke.
That's right.
So they're not even. So even they stop. Oh, so we're gonna stop killing Black folk. Well, guess what? Y'all still ain't doing nothing. When was the last time, Maurice? Let me put this a certain way. For sake of argument, I mean, we know there are criminals in every culture. We know there are folks out here gangbang. We know there are brothers out here gangbang. When's the last time somebody had a video or a news story or saw the police running up on some gangbangers that might have committed drive-by shooters? They don't run up on that. And you know why? Here's the other thing. And I say this to people as well, my brother. A lot of the people out here slinging in the streets, they actually go and recruit and flip them so that they're even on the payroll. So our tax dollars are even paying for the criminals, so-called criminals, that they're supposed to be catching and protecting us from. So they're killing those of us who aren't criminals and paying those who are criminals. And so when and whenever I say that to people on the defund, it's defund. They get real quiet. They don't have nothing else to say. So you all are financing really a criminal enterprise because it does not serve us at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much there. I mean, one of the things that, I mean, this is something that we know, like if you live in a Black community or have lived in a Black community, right, then you understand the fact that it's not like police, and Black communities are the most heavily policed communities you could imagine. It's not like police are intervening and preventing cycles of harm, or stopping crime before it happens, or stopping violent crime before it happens. That doesn't happen. That's not realistic. And it's not as though police are solving all of these incidences, especially as it relates to Black folks. One thing we do know is that they're causing a lot of harm, right? Because, I mean, if you are Black, or if you are Black and lived in a Black community, or if you are Black just in general, it's very likely that you have experienced harm, right, through police. And it's also very likely that you have not experienced justice through the police, right? Think about that. Think about how much harm they must be committing, that so many of us, almost to the person, have experienced a bad interaction, have gotten beaten up, have been wrongfully arrested, have been stopped and frisked, wrongfully jailed. So there's a lot of activity on regular folks just trying to get through their day being harassed and humiliated, and very little activity going through preventing cycles of harm and violence, making us safe, right? So this is not working, right? And the second thing that you said, I think, is really powerful. In any democracy, the military and the police should be under civilian control. So if we call this place a democracy and we claim that Black people are citizens and are free people, then the police work for us, right? We should not be occupied by them. But we know that that's not true. We know that we basically are experiencing what people experience when they're subject to an occupying force. We don't tell the police what to do. They tell us what to do. And so we're calling for democracy. We should be able to decide how much of our city's budget goes to what programs.
Yeah.
And if you want to just take all of the politics out of it, all of the studies have shown investments in youth jobs and what that translates into reductions in crime and harm, investments in street level violence interruption, where people are having conversations before a conflict escalates into violence, and people are doing the work in order to mitigate that harm and de-escalate the conflict. That's the work that people think police are doing. That's actually community members doing that. Those community members need more resources. Mental health. How many people have called 911 because somebody that they love, somebody in their community, is experiencing a mental health episode, which is a public health crisis, right? This is a health issue, not a criminal issue. But then a armed police officer is coming in without the training, without the support, and escalating and making it a criminal and violent interaction. So we know what works and what doesn't work based on our lived experience. And we understand that there's this narrative around, well, what are we going to do? We need the police. No, we need to be safe. So let's focus on safety and figure out what are the things that will keep us safe. Nobody wants to be subject to crime. Nobody wants to be subject to harm. We all want to be in safe communities. Let's focus on safety and let's figure out the things that we know if we invested in will keep us safe.
Lastly, Brother Maurice Mitchell, you're with the Working Families Party. M4BL, Movement for Black Lives, is involved in electoral justice, even had a convention and whatnot. Talk to us about that intersection and what you see coming now. Myself being one of the co-founders of the most recent Black political party to have ballot status back in the 90s in Washington, D.C., the Umoja Party. I'm always curious and intrigued and mobilized around any discussion about what is electoral and our people's role in the electoral process and what we can and should do. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, this is an exciting time for the merging of social movements and electoral justice, right? A lot of times we've been in different lanes, and sometimes we haven't figured out how to merge the urgency of social justice with using electoral tools. I remember the Umoja Party. I was in DC during those days. And right now, the Movement for Black Lives and the Working Families Party actually is working on a collaboration. The Electoral Justice Project and the Movement for Black Lives and the Working Families Party put together the Justice Fund. And we put it together because we saw entities like the Fraternal Order of the Police and other police concerns basically use their influence and money in order to basically bribe and force local elected officials not to move police accountability. So what we decided to do was we were going to put our fund together, and all of those folks that were raising their hands and saying that it's time for accountability, it's time to move resources to our people, we're going to support them, we're going to endorse them and get them elected on the hyper local level. So in the next few weeks, you'll be seeing a slate. There's India Walton, who's running in Buffalo. There's exciting candidates in Texas that are running. You're going to see a slate of candidates that are ready to take a stand. And we know that they're going to face backlash, which is why we need to support them and flank them, get them into office. But then once they're in the office, we're going to need to continue to support them. Sisters like Tashara Jones,
right.
When they're doing that work, we know that they're going to get backlash. We need to support them through that. So the Movement for Black Lives, I know all around the country, is going to advance this work using electoral strategies, and the Working Families Party is going to be right there with the Movement for Black Lives, using our tools in order to make sure that true progressives who stand up for our people get the support that they need in order to do the work. And then once they're in office, we hold them accountable to making sure that stance translates to policy. And when they pass that policy, we stay with them when we know backlash is going to come.
You all have endorsed in the New York City mayor's race, and folks, I know that's local to us here, but it has national implications. You've endorsed the two women, I believe, Maya Wiley and Diana Morales, I believe. I'm correct about that, right?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah. So in terms of the national implications, What's the working family, and forgive me for not knowing this, what's the working family party's position on this ranked choice voting that's going to take place for the first time in NYC? We've seen it in smallest jurisdictions, but it's big now because it's in big 8 million person New York, and this is the big time. It's on the lights on Broadway. What do you think about that ranked choice voting?
We're generally supportive of ranked choice voting because it gives voters more choice, and it prevents the spoiler dilemma, right? Where you have to focus on one candidate, even if you like another, and you could actually rank the level of interest that you have in candidates. And to me, it creates a more vibrant democracy, more choice. It allows for people with really interesting ideas that maybe in a traditional campaign would be considered niche. It allows them to be able to really provide something to the debate. So we think ranked choice generally is a great reform. We believe in a number of reforms.
Right.
As you know, we are a third party. We have ballot access in a number of states, including New York. And, we think one of the challenges, and we think that it's a challenge for Black folks, is the two-party system, the rigid two-party system, right? And we need to break down all of the really strong legal regimes that kind of hold in place the two-party duopoly, right? And we need to open up political choice. So anything that does that, and I'd love to talk to you more about that stuff because there's so many reforms that allow that to happen, from fusion voting to ranked choice to multi-member districts to ranked choice with multi-member districts. These are all ways that people with great ideas aren't blocked out by the two-party duopoly, Coke or Pepsi.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. I agree wholeheartedly. And good to see people still holding up the bloodstained banner for third parties and independent political parties. We need a multi-party democracy.
That's right. A multi-party and multiracial democracy that is functional.
That's right. That's right. Maurice Mitchell, m4bl.org and also workingfamilies.org to keep up with everything the Movement for Black Lives and the Working Families Party is doing. Brother, this hopefully won't be the last time we chat. Appreciate your work. Folks, we have to organize. We can't just tweet. I keep saying that.
That's right.
Twitter alone, tweeting alone is not going to save us. Arguing people on Twitter back and forth and trying to one-up people with rhetoric on Twitter is not the solution. That's social media, not social movement. We need to educate, organize, and mobilize. And organizing requires discipline. It requires being involved. It requires being accountable. All right. Practicing democracy within the movement itself. Twitter is not a platform for democracy. All right. So, folks, please get involved in the Movement for Black Lives. Get involved in the Working Families Party. Join some organization, Lord have mercy. Read Kwame Ture and what he had to say.
Right. Yeah, Kwame. I was about to say Kwame Ture. He said it. Organize.
That's right. All of our success, all of our movements have had organization behind them that have been successful. Right. All right. So please. And it doesn't have to be the organization everybody else is in, everybody agree, but join some organization.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, Brother Maurice Mitchell.
All right. Good to be here. Looking forward to seeing you again.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.